To our friends, we are here. To our enemies, we are coming. In defense of the revolutionary politics and actions of Occupy Oakland. On November 2nd, 2011, a general strike was called by Occupy Oakland in response to the police raid on the Occupy encampment and the near murder of Iraq veteran Scott Olson. In the days after he was shot, the street was flooded with people at night who donned masks, fought the police, and attacked their vehicles. In a week, over 50,000 people were mobilized as downtown Oakland was ground to a halt, and upwards of 100,000 shut down the port of Oakland for several hours. The events of November 2nd were inspiring, but after the strike, many repeated old critiques of violence and claimed that certain tactics, such as those of the Black Bloc, played into the hands of the police. This essay was an attempt to defend the revolutionary character of the day's events in particular, and Occupy Oakland in general. Quote, "It is not our desire to participate in violence, but it is even less our desire to lose. If we do not resist actively when they come to take what we have won back, then we will surely lose. As they sought to abuse us, beat us, kill us, we knew there was no other option than to fight back. Be prepared to defend these things you have occupied." A letter in solidarity from Egypt. On Wednesday, November 2nd, 2011, history was made in Oakland. In the streets, history was lived. In the tens of thousands, people from across Oakland and Northern California converged, responding to a call by the Occupy Oakland General Assembly the previous week for a general strike. More than 50,000 people, some say as high as 100,000, collectively went on strike, broke the law en masse, shut down the flow of capital at the port, and defied the police orders for hours. The crowds were a wide section of poor and working populations. Students, union and non-union workers, the poor, the homeless. 14th and Broadway was occupied from earlier in the morning until late at night, when the police used flash grenades and tear gas to remove the crowd. In the intersection of the general strike, a huge banner was hung across the street that read, "Death to Capitalism, Long Live the Oakland Commune." The Oakland Commune refers to the occupation of Oscar Grant Plaza, formerly known as Frank Ogawa Plaza, the small park outside the City Hall, which has been occupied since December 10th. In the early hours of October 25th, acting on orders from former Union and Communist Labor Party organizer Mary Jean Quan, the camp was raided with extreme force. Police from various agencies evicted the camp, arrested many, and shot tear gas and other weapons into the camp, which contained families and children. A rally of over 1,000 followed that same night, and people marched back to the plaza only to be met again with gas and flash grenades. One protester, former soldier Scott Olson, was hit in the head with a canister and was critically injured. Driven by desire not only to protect the occupation but also to defend the very real community that had been created, people marched and tried to retake the plaza several times until early morning. Some courageously fought with the police, threw tear gas canisters back at police, and busted up law enforcement cars. The next day, people again reconvened at 14th and Broadway as news of Scott Olson had settled in, and the mayor, who had been out of town during the raid, returned to the city. Police were nowhere to be seen, and after the security fence placed by the police was dismantled, a general assembly of several thousands decided almost unanimously in favor of a general strike. The occupation continued, and once again became home to hundreds of people who recreated the kitchen, library, medical space, kid space, and much more. Decisions were made without leaders or hierarchy, through working groups and general assemblies. Furthermore, the camp decided not to work with police, the city, or any politician or political parties. This has been a major step forward for the Occupy movement, and shows the extent to which anarchist ideas have influenced Occupy Oakland. During the strike on November 2nd, speakers addressed the crowd and messages of solidarity were read from as far away as Pakistan. Earlier in the week, people across the US as well as in Egypt marched in solidarity with Oakland. In Cairo, they carried signs that read, in broken English, "Fuck the police." News commentators even mentioned how the mood in Oakland was vastly different from Occupy Wall Street in New York. People here were both more willing to fight and to name their enemies: capitalism, the government that protects it, the police that enforce it. As a solution, Oakland occupiers looked to the world created out of the occupations, one of mutual aid, horizontal decision-making, and solidarity. The general strike was not an attempt to ask for dialogue with anyone in power. People were consciously refusing to sell their labor and reproduce this capitalist society. Together, en masse as poor and working people, we took a side in the class war and started to hit back. Starting at 9 in the morning, several large groups marched on banks, forcing many to close, as well as on several businesses that did not allow their employees to strike. In one instance, a coffee and pastry shop was closed down after several minutes of picketing, and the boss allowed workers to leave with a full day's pay. In the afternoon, an anti-capitalist march began with over 1,000 people present. The stated goal of the march was to force businesses, especially corporations and banks, to close their doors. Windows at various large banks were broken, and fire extinguishers filled with paint were used to write "strike" in huge letters across Whole Foods. People chanted, "Union busting is disgusting," as windows were broken and some of the patio furniture was taken and placed into the street. Whole Foods has a history of stopping the forming of unions at its stores and its firing of workers for organizing. Later, as the march returned to Oscar Grant Plaza, many of the windows at the front of the nearby Wells Fargo were broken out by a large crowd. Between 4 and 5 p.m., tens of thousands of people marched from Oscar Grant Plaza to the Port of Oakland. Some longshore ILWU workers at the port walked off the job or simply did not come to work and helped shut down the port. By 5 p.m., thousands of people had reached the port, and it was effectively shut down, with workers being sent home with pay. The occupation of the port by thousands of people cost literally millions of dollars and disrupted one of the largest and most important flows of capital on the West Coast. At one point, a worker drove his car into the path of several protesters, threatening them with injury. His car was quickly surrounded, and the driver's tires were slashed, and the car was pushed out by protesters with the driver still inside. As night came, thousands of people began leaving the port after word was given that as of 8 p.m. shift change, the port was shut down. At around 10 p.m., about 100 people marched from Oscar Grant Plaza to the Travelers Aid Society on 520 Broadway, a building that had been recently foreclosed on and which had once housed various programs for homeless people. After several hours of people enjoying the space and listening to speeches and music outside, word began to spread that the police were on their way. Fearing massive police violence on the same level as the raid against the occupation at Oscar Grant Plaza, people began building barricades on either side of the street, and as police arrived, the barricades on Broadway were set ablaze to stop police from entering the street and to dull any tear gas. When the police finally arrived, they fired tear gas and threw concussion grenades to get people to disperse. At some point, many people left occupied buildings and went down Broadway, or to the end of the plaza. Windows of the nearby police recruiting station that had already been smashed out during the recent anti-police brutality march were once again broken and defaced, as many people took out their frustrations on the building as the nearest manifestation of police. 2 businesses were also looted, and graffiti artists used this time to write various slogans. The police continued to attack in the early morning, and many people were afraid that there would be an attempt by the authorities to evict the plaza once again. While the plaza eviction did not occur, police did make up to 80 arrests and finally took back the streets surrounding Oscar Grant Plaza by around 4 a.m. on Thursday, November 4th. In the wake of the police attack, some within the occupation have called for the expulsion of anarchists. They have called for the repaying of the banks for their broken windows and for the formal apology made by Occupy Oakland. Furthermore, they are attempting to condemn anyone who promotes violence and to ensure that Occupy Oakland will from now on take a completely nonviolent approach to organizing. Lastly, the most sinister move is the slander that anarchists are the police themselves, agent provocateurs to ruin the movement. This essay is written in defense of the Oakland Commune, as well as the militant actions that have been taken to make Occupy Oakland a revolutionary project against capitalism. We had no right to be there, only the organized power to do so. There is no power without control. Conflict. Watching a video in support of Occupy Oakland produced by MoveOn.org, a group that supports and raises funds for the Democratic Party, leads one to believe that those in the plaza were exercising the rights of speech and peaceful assembly, and in turn were attacked by a police force that does not respect those rights. This narrative has been picked up by many within the Occupy movement, including some within Occupy Oakland, and it was important to counter it because, quite simply, it is a lie. The occupation of Oscar Grant Plaza was possible because people took the space. They did not ask. They did not have the right to be there. The current laws on the books say that camping in the park overnight is illegal. You are not supposed to have amplified sound and be able to cook and serve food without permits. Even the decisions made en masse by General Assemblies which forbade police from coming into the area are of course direct violations of law. But there is nothing wrong with this. This, in fact, is a good thing. People did not hold space at Oscar Grant Plaza because they had a right to do so given to them by the government of the United States. They made the occupation possible by their sheer will and numbers. They took something and held their ground. What's more is they asked for people to come and join them in breaking the law, to make their movement bigger, and people did. This created a base from which the camp could organize and run itself, as well as a material force that could greater support other struggles. This is why the General Assembly passed an agreement stating that they would offer material solidarity to anyone occupying schools and foreclosed properties. The nature of the encampment was very radical. One news commentator stated, "More Malcolm X than Martin Luther King." A growing illegal occupation of public space that openly denounces and refuses to work with the police or city government is something the authorities find problematic, to say the least. Furthermore, a growing section of the occupation was clearly anti-capitalist and revolutionary. This is something that the state could not have allowed to continue. And is it any wonder that when the police were cracking down on Occupy Oakland, they were also arresting people on the other side of the city for making plans to move on Occupy San Francisco? If they can't co-opt the movement, they will try to destroy it. So the city had to come up with a way to evict the camp. Using their trusty friends, the corporate media, they painted a picture of a violent, dirty camp, spinning out of control without the help of a benevolent police force and a sympathetic city government. Occupy Oakland was said to be swimming with rats and filth and dirty kitchens and violent homeless people. A series of warning letters and notices of eviction were sent to the camp. And finally, on Tuesday morning, the state had had enough. With the mayor signing the order and then heading out of town, the police were left to do the one thing they do well. At this point, many people can agree that the reason the state gave for the raid had nothing to do with the state's real desire to destroy the occupation. Clearly, the government does not want this movement to grow and organize. As one comrade said in the early days of the camp, "This is America. You're not supposed to be able to do this." And so, when the flash grenades exploded and the tear gas filled our lungs, it wasn't because someone forgot to read their constitution. It's because our material force, our occupation, stood in direct opposition to everything the power structure is. The way of life that is capital cannot allow us to exist. Many people quickly grasped this concept, and no blame was given to anyone who, facing down rubber bullets and gas, picked up a canister that could have been aimed at anyone's head, such as Scott Olson's, and threw it right back at the police. No one seemed to cry when the cars of officers who attacked and hurt us had their windows smashed into oh so many lovely pieces. No, people understood in an instant that this is war and we will fight. Just as the Egyptians did, just as the Greeks did, just as the students in the UK did. After the first raid on the camp, many people came to a very simple yet important conclusion. The government lies and the media helps them. Their evictions had nothing to do with keeping the park clean and protecting that tree. It had everything to do with maintaining state power. After the raid, the media continued its blatant whitewash. The police had to fire on us because the protesters were throwing rocks, they cried. "We don't know who shot the tear gas, it must have been the protesters," retorted the media for the police. We read the headlines and shook our heads. The occupation of Oscar Grant Plaza was not an exercise in our rights as Americans. It was an expression of power as human beings. In flexing that power, we met the violence of the state, but held our ground. On the night of November 2nd, we escalated again, knowing that the cold weather was only going to get colder, knowing that just as we took the plaza, we can take other things, and knowing that capital will never meet our needs and will exploit us, a foreclosed building was occupied. It once offered services to the homeless, and the idea was to create more services for the community as well as for the movement. In keeping with the decision passed by the General Assembly, hundreds came out to join the occupation, and also to defend it. Soon the police arrived and began to clear people from the occupied community center, just as they did Oscar Grant Plaza only a week before. Nothing was different, everything was exactly the same. That night, and into the next day, the media attacked us with the same ferocity the police did. Just as the media was used to spread lies about Oscar Grant Plaza, and thus endorse and build popular support for the raid against it, this time the media gave justification for the police attack and helped demonize anarchists who attempted to open a community center. Thus, Jim says, the police came in the area only after people started a bonfire, perpetuating the lie that the police just wanted to keep residents safe. They said the anarchists wanted to burn down the building, which hides the truth that we opened the building for all and for the community that's surrounding it. That the police arrived after people began writing graffiti and breaking windows, when in reality this happened largely after the police violence began. This last narrative attempts to split occupiers between violent and non-violent. It also hides the targets that actually were attacked, and the degree of which graffiti artists of all types took to the walls to write revolutionary messages. And out of that tension, the corporate media gives us the group of heroes. The fighters of anarchists and the defenders of the peaceful protest, the Peace Police. Peace Police. A violent contingent stalks Occupy Oakland. They have been known to assault protesters during marches, call people faggots if they disagree with them, or don't like them, and generally use violence to stop the actions of anyone they don't agree with. No, it's not the Black Bloc, it's the Peace Police. For those fortunate enough to exist outside the world of protest politics, the Peace Police are demonstrators that try to get other people to stop doing things they consider to be violent. Case in point, when people spontaneously begin to dismantle the fence around the camp on October 26, before the General Assembly, Peace Police scream, "Stop, stay nonviolent." Thus, for many of the Peace Police, violent actions are anything that can be seen as confrontational, spontaneous, militant, or forceful. For example, the occupation itself. That is to say, as far as the Peace Police are concerned, violence equates to effectiveness. And the corporate media, the lapdogs of the ruling class, love these people. One video shot on the news shows Peace Police bravely placing themselves in between anarchists and the windows of a bank in order to stop people from banging on it, in order to force the bank to close. In other situations, Peace Police have become extremely violent towards individuals just for expressing their opinions. During other situations, Peace Police have used violence or fought those attempting to break or paint over property of large banks and walls of corporations. And someone wrote in the online essay, "We laugh at the waves they crash on us." What we found comical about the whole event, the liberal pacifists themselves destroyed the myth of the ideology of pacifism. Although from their position they weren't able to see this, in the process of smashing bank windows, there were a couple of protesters who took a more hardline stance on pacifism, with a couple of individuals going as far as grabbing, hitting, and tackling people smashing windows. There was also talk from the peaceful protesters of forcefully removing people's masks. Of course, the sweet irony in all of this is that while property was being destroyed, and it should be made clear that it was only banks and union-busting businesses that got destroyed, the only violence directed towards actual human beings was on the part of the peaceful protesters. We noticed here that the projected goals of pacifism, a peaceful world, is not possible through pacifism. We also define the difference between non-violence and pacifism, the former being a specific tactic individuals might choose to employ, the latter being an ideology forced onto other people. It is here that we see the very same logic of the state and the police embodied in actual bodies, that peace has to be forced upon other people regardless of how this happens. It should bring you joy then to hear that peace police were beaten Greek style with wooden dowels and poles." Unquote. Why has the media demonized the anarchists and heralded the peace police as heroes? It is simple. Because the anarchists are revolutionaries and the peace police are not. The anarchists promote a world that is based on the same anti-hierarchical organization that the camp is run on. They actively defend the occupation of Oscar Grant Plaza and of foreclosed properties from cops. They're willing to use direct action to occupy space and also to attack the property of the 1%. The peace police are not. They do not want things to be confrontational, to escalate, or a revolution. It is telling that to this day only the police, whether Oakland police or the peace police, have been the ones to use violence against people to make them do what they want, or in a non-defensive way. Perhaps this goes without saying, but fuck the police. The property of the 1%. The strike on November 2nd cost the city of Oakland and various banks, city governments, and multinational corporations millions of dollars. This was paid in the way for overtime of the police, money lost by banks and businesses for shutting down, the billions of dollars lost from port closures and workers wildcat striking, and the destruction of property of banks and large corporations. It is the latter action that have caused so much disagreement. According to reformists, it is violent to break the windows of banks and corporations. Since property is not alive and cannot feel pain, many contend that by destroying property, people are being forceful and destructive and thus violent. But if one claims that breaking of a non-living window or spray painting of a wall is somehow violent, how is shutting down one of the ports or the occupations of public space not violent in the same manner? Based on the numbers alone, the occupations to the port cost banks and corporations millions of dollars, more than the windows that were broken just hours before. And the shutting down of the port was forceful. People refused to leave and physically blocked the movement of goods and workers. It violated the ability of the port to function as such and destroyed the ability of capital to reproduce itself. The same goes with the occupation. Furthermore, the stated goal of the port shutdown was in part to act in solidarity with longshore workers in contract fight against scab labor. In a twisted logic, many herald the direct actions of workers in the ILWU who fought with police and destroyed company property in the Pacific Northwest, yet were antagonistic towards the Black Bloc. There's also something to be said about the very targets of the attack. Bank of America, Chase, Wells Fargo, and corporations like Whole Foods. The hatred for banks should be very clear and easy for anyone to grasp. They're helping to evict millions of people, holding people hostage with debt, investing in environmentally destructive industries, and in private prisons and immigration detention facilities. Whole Foods has a long history of gentrification, firing workers for organizing, and paying pathetically low wages. Furthermore, it is a corporation like any other and has failed to close for the general strike, thus smashy smashy. But while some may not believe that the breaking of a window isn't a problem in itself, they believe this idea that the destruction of property causes the police to react more aggressively against protesters. The only problem with this line of thinking is that police were nowhere to be seen during the anti-capitalist march where the Black Bloc attacked banks. In fact, the only physical violence that happened was between peace police and those resisting their attacks. Furthermore, when compared with the cost of everything else that day, namely the shutting down of the Port of Oakland, the cost of windows being smashed were minuscule. The reason the police arrived later that night on Broadway was very clear. They were there to stop people from occupying a building and to put down the general strike. And once the police began to evict the occupied building, people responded by fighting back and attempting to hold the streets. One of the false narratives that continues to be perpetuated by the media is the idea that bad protesters ruin good movements. The government will attack any and all movements that are effective that seek to disrupt the status quo. Over the last 100 years, two of the most influential radical organizations to come out of the U.S., the Industrial Workers of the World and the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense, suffered at the hands of the state and corporate power. Their members were beaten, killed, imprisoned, and slandered in the media. They too were blamed for ruining social movements and bringing the very police violence that was dished out to them. The IWW promoted sabotaging as a legitimate tactic in the workplace and encouraged workers to strike across racial lines, building for a general strike which could expropriate the means of production, the working class. In May of 1990, Judy Berry, an IWW Earth First organizer who was working to bring radical environmentalists together with union loggers, was almost killed when a bomb exploded in her car. The attack was carried out in part by the FBI, who wanted to stop Judy's organizing efforts. The Panthers, who armed themselves and patrolled the police, engaged in a variety of other tactics and did not distinguish between self-defense against the police and government agencies and the building of revolutionary force through community organizing and survival programs, breakfast for school children, etc. For this, J. Edgar Hoover named them the most dangerous group in the country and created a massive police and government campaign against them, resulting in assassinations, frame-ups, counterintelligence operations, and imprisonment of its members, many of which are still incarcerated. Repression of social movements is not caused by bad protesters, it is caused by the authorities consciously waging social war against anyone and anything that threatens their power. It is also nothing new in either Oakland or across the world. The state will continue to repress social movements in order to stop threats to the status quo. As the anarchist journal A Murder of Crows wrote, when repression strikes and comrades are arrested, the reaction of many is to dissociate themselves from those who are being attacked by the state. Liberals, progressives, and most activists draw upon official statements denouncing violence, sabotage, and illegality, all in hopes of proving to the government that they are good citizens who like to follow the rules and who are interested in positive social change. This spineless response is standard for the left and serves to flank the state's actions. Dissociation is not only a cowardly act, but also based on faulty logic. The underlying premise of dissociation is that the state has reacted to a specific occurrence and that those being persecuted are responsible for bringing repression upon themselves and everyone else. Certainly there are specific acts the state responds to, but this is not where repression stems from. In actuality, repression is a long-term strategy employed by the state regardless of specific illegal acts and is an attempt to maintain the status quo by any means necessary. Repression, then, is always present in many forms. It is the police, the courts, the prison system, the proliferation of security cameras, the immigrant detention centers, and the like." Unquote. As anarchist Margaret Killjoy wrote about the day's events, immediately after the property destruction began, the debate raged. Was this okay? Did this represent us? The only violence I personally witnessed was perpetrated by people screaming nonviolence who attempted to hurt people who had just defaced property. But it was clear that the march was of two minds. Still, when a group tried to split the march, nonviolent go this way, violent go that way, they were met by apathy and abandoned their plans. What was fascinating to me, though, was I encountered at least as many non-mass participants who were enamored, or even participating in the destruction as those who felt alienated or betrayed. One man I saw shouting into the broken windows, I believe it was Bank of America, at the bankers inside, "Do you hear us now? We tried everything. We wrote letters. We signed petitions. We protested. And did you listen? Did you hear that, though? Do you hear us now?" Unquote. Been down this road before. In the first hours of 2009, Oscar Grant was shot and killed by BART police. His murder led to a round of riots in Oakland, many of which took place on 14th and Broadway. The largest occurred in July of 2010 after Grant's killer, Johannes Messerly, was found guilty of involuntary manslaughter, not murder. Much has been written about Oscar Grant's murder and the movement against police brutality that it helped breathe life into. But we want to go back and review the push from the media, mainstream nonprofit organizations, and the police, who were united in creating a narrative to divide protests along lines of violence, geography, and race. First came the police and the city officials, saying the white anarchists were outside agitators coming into Oakland to disrupt legitimate protests of black residents who mostly wanted to remain peaceful. Nonprofit groups picked up this narrative, calling on protesters to remain nonviolent and not to trash Oakland. This was an attempt by the power structure to take the teeth out of a very black and militant movement that many anarchists were also involved in. As one anarchist in the Bay Area wrote in the text, "They can't shoot us all," many nonprofits oppose the collective uprisings on spontaneous activity because they feel a need to control the movement. These organizations view themselves as saviors of the downtrodden. When dominated people rise up on their own terms, it threatens the position of leadership these organizations occupy in their imaginary worlds. We've also come under attack from nonprofits that operate entirely under the influence of the city government. One of these city-funded nonprofits has taken up a full-fledged assault against us, using some of the $2 million in city money they've received to wage a propaganda campaign against the unity we have found with each other through this struggle. They have even used city money to pay young people to come to their indoctrination workshops, where they speak of the evils of people coming together and standing up to their enemies. They've also helped to spread the absurd logic of the mayor's office that only people born and raised in Oakland have the right to take to the streets. This is an attempt to foster collaboration between disenfranchised people and their exploiters in a united front against the enigmatic outsiders. In the past, our enemies have attempted to divide movements by distinguishing the good element from the destructive elements. But a racial division wedged between groups and the uncontrollable element in an attempt to neutralize our collective strength." Unquote. It would be wise to keep these words in mind, as once again we face the possibility of our movement becoming divided and broken. Once again, the lesson of struggle for Oscar Grant shows how much the police, media, and much of the left were united in holding the line to break any sort of militant resistance, fostering perceived divisions between protesters based on racial or tactical lines. Living, breathing anarchy. Anarchism is the idea that the state exists in order to keep the inequalities and divisions within society in place through coercion and violence. This is the nature of all states, to preserve the existing society divided by class, race, and gender, and to protect the economic systems that indentures, enslaves, displaces, and imprisons the vast majority of the population while generating wealth and power for a small minority. Thus, the state is not a neutral force. It cannot be reformed or taken over to serve the people. It is an instrument that preserves the inequalities that exist between us for the benefit of the few. Anarchists believe in non-representational forms of decision-making, against power being structured in a hierarchy, meaning from the head. Instead, anarchists believe in horizontal organizations of power, anarchy from the base. Anarchism stands for resources being held in common by autonomous communities and free groups of individuals, not as private property. Human labor should be put towards human needs. We should not be wage slaves divorced from the necessities of life. Lastly, we desire a relationship with the land that does not take and destroy, one that is in balance with the natural world. These ideas can be seen best in the general assemblies that have taken place in Occupy Oakland and across the country and the world, at different occupations. Here, groups of people organize themselves and make decisions without hierarchical organization or representatives. In the camp, work was performed by autonomous groups along the lines of mutual aid and human solidarity. People make food and feed each other. Some donate labor, others donating medical supplies. People organize to protect themselves against the police and also to settle disputes and arguments. People hold workshops and classes, create newspapers and spread information, make music, hold meetings and make decisions, all without a central hierarchy or bosses of any kind. Many of the values and organizational models of the Occupy movement are anarchist, even if many do not use this term. Given the presence of anarchists from the earliest days of Occupy Oakland, it is no surprise that the General Assembly has supported many anarchist positions that other occupations would not. It does not cooperate or work with the police, and in fact expels them from the camp. It does not work or cooperate with politicians or political parties. It does not make demands to fight the power structure it is fighting. It organizes itself to fight that power structure. It does not ask for the things it needs. It takes them, occupies them, and uses them for its own benefit. But how do we get there? How do we organize ourselves into a revolutionary force that can make Occupy Oakland into Occupy everything? Anarchists do not believe in working within the system. We do not participate in elections or encourage people to vote. Instead, we encourage people to self-organize where they work, where they live, and where they go to school. People need to take direct action and to occupy space to organize from and meet their needs directly. The state will not wither away under the groundswell of an alternative society or even from the occupations themselves. The state will use violence to crush threats to its power and destroy revolutionary or potentially revolutionary movements. This is why we saw the state respond to Occupy Oakland on the 25th in just the way it did. Thus, a revolutionary movement must defend itself from the violence of the state, or it will simply be crushed. Such a struggle must use a variety of tactics to not only spread our occupations, strikes, and direct actions, but also to defend the spaces that we have already taken. Those that scream non-violence to people fighting back against police have no solution in this regard. We must defend ourselves from the state and their police if our movement is to survive and grow. As things heat up, more and more people start to take action. Workers go on strike, students walk out and occupy their schools, people fight the police, those in their homes and apartments and trailers take back their living space. Property of the capitalist class will be attacked. It is going to happen. People will riot when police kill someone just as they did when Oscar Grant was shot. They will loot stores after pushing police out and retake things that other poor and working people have made. They will spray paint the walls with slogans and messages. Homeless people, those foreclosed on, and our own movements will take over buildings, plazas, and property. We will break the locks and move in. Workers on strike will attack scabs, fight police, destroy company property. People on a march against capitalism will pass by banks and understand them to be institutions, part of a system they want to destroy, and windows will be broken. As the economic and ecological crisis deepens, as the struggle escalates, And as more people are drawn into taking action, social struggles will continue to deepen. People will defend themselves and they will engage with their enemies. They will organize and they will act en masse. This is not a new struggle. It is the one that has existed since capitalism began. We can still feel ourselves flinching as the flash grenades explode in our memories. Our noses and skin still burn and tingle from the tear gas. Our bruises have not healed, and we wonder if anyone we know is still in jail. But we also remember the sea of people who responded to the call for a general strike. We remember the workers who went on Wildcat and called out sick, tens of thousands who shut down the port, who bravely stood up to the police, and those who took action against the banks. Remember the students who walked out of class and the kids who came out with their parents. We feel amazing warmth from everyone who braved rubber bullets and tear gas canisters to defend the occupation. We remember it all, for on that day, we walked along the streets, where police were not allowed, walking into liberated spaces and occupied buildings, as music and laughter filled what was once nothing. We saw graffiti on the walls and it brought smiles to our faces because it was exactly what we were thinking. Indeed, our comrades are here with us. They are welcome here. We are in Chiapas on the first day of 1994. We were on Ohlone land occupying Glen Clove and Vallejo only a few months ago. We are back in Oakland during the general strike of 1946. We are in Exarchia in Greece, right after Alexis was murdered. And we are spilling into the streets with so many thousands of others. We are ourselves, only a year ago, rioting on 14th and Broadway as Foot Locker is looted, and someone is writing "Riot for Oscar" on the wall. We are in Egypt. We are in London. We are Orwell in Barcelona, and we see the red and black flags waving, and we know now what he meant when he wrote what it was like to be in a city where the working class was in the driver's seat. We are coming. We are already here.